Welcome to another episode of WLVT's Ask the Experts, live from the Hub. I'm your host, Kelly Boyd. Today's expert is attorney Seth Thompson of Maggio Thompson Personal Injury Attorneys. Welcome back, Seth.
Thanks, Kelly. I appreciate you having me back.
You can, our questions submitted, the questions submitted for this episode are mainly about workers' comp.
Right.
Compensation for work-related injuries, getting hurt on the job. Seth, have you seen a lot of those cases?
I have. My office has actually represented more than 1,000 injured workers across the state.
That is a lot. So
That's
you can
a lot.
join our conversation while we're live. But if we don't get to your questions and comments before the end of the show, please visit our Ask the Experts page on WLVT.com. So Seth, let's dig in. You ready?
Okay. Yeah.
Okay. What is workers' comp in general?
Just very generally, everybody has heard about workers' comp, but essentially it's a no-fault system that allows an injured employee to receive some sort of benefits, medical benefits, monetary benefits, if they've been injured during the course and scope of their employment. So just that is a very general idea, but we'll get into a little bit more about it.
Okay, I'm sure we will. We have plenty of questions today. Who is entitled to workers' comp?
Any employee in Mississippi who is injured on the job, provided that they work for a company that has at least 5 employees. And so when we look at 5 employees, your boss is included in that number.
Okay.
So as long as you work for a company that has 5 or more employees, you're injured, it doesn't matter whose fault it is, it could be your own fault. As long as those provisions are met, you will be entitled to workers' compensation.
Okay. What should I do after I get injured at work, immediately after I get injured?
That's a very good question. So the first thing you want to do is to report the injury. Tell your boss, tell your supervisor, tell if your company has an HR department, report the injury. The workers' compensation statute requires that it be reported, and then the next thing you want to do, of course, is seek medical attention. Get to a doctor as quickly as you can, report the injury to your doctor also. So the biggest thing, just tell somebody and then go get medical treatment.
Okay. What happens if the injury is so severe that you're not able to report it at that time?
Then, well, typically if it's going to be that kind of an injury, then the reporting requirement is out. So if you're knocked unconscious, you have witnesses who have seen the accident. If you have a supervisor who saw it, of course, if you can't report the injury, then that's fine. The law will allow some grace there for you.
Okay. I was just wondering that myself. Okay. Does the insurance company get to choose my doctor?
No, they don't. And so a lot of my clients will come to me and they'll say that, well, the insurance company or my job sent me to this particular doctor. The law allows you to choose your own doctor.
Okay.
Now, on into the claim, maybe your doctor is recommending some treatment that the insurance company disagrees with. They do have the right to send you for what we call an employer's medical evaluation. That's a one-time visit with a physician who will look at you, not treat you, but they will examine you and make a decision as to whether they feel like the medical treatment that your doctor is providing is reasonable.
Okay, so that's fair, right?
Somewhat.
Somewhat.
It depends on which doctor they send you to.
Oh, no. Okay. Why do I need a workers' comp lawyer?
That's another good question. So when you're dealing with workers' comp, typically if somebody gets hurt at work, they're only going to get hurt at work one time in their life, right? And so this is a foreign area. And you're going to be hearing terms that you've never heard before. You're going to hear terms like temporary total disability, maximum medical improvement, permanent partial disability, things that you just don't have any idea about.
Right.
And then also an injured worker typically is not going to know what they're entitled to, particularly in terms of monetary compensation. For instance, we had I represented a lady one time who was injured on the coast. She hurt her shoulder. She did everything on her own, and the insurance company offered her a monetary settlement of $12,000. And she wound up hiring our firm. We got her $48,000, in just a little less than a month, because that's what her claim was worth.
Okay. It looks like we have lots of questions coming in on our Facebook Live as well. We're going to try to get to those in just a moment. Let's see. Next question from the Ask the Experts page is, does it matter if an accident was my fault?
No, it doesn't. And that's the good thing about workers' comp. Typically, if you're talking about an injury that involves negligence, you're talking about like a car accident claim or a slip and fall claim, and there you have to show that someone else did something that they shouldn't have done. But with workers' comp, you don't have to worry about that. So like I said, even if it's your own fault or if it's someone else's fault, it doesn't matter.
Okay.
You're still going to be entitled to those benefits.
Okay. What benefits speaking of benefits, what benefits can I receive from workers' compensation?
There are 3 different types of benefits you can receive. There is what we call temporary total disability benefits. Those are your workers' comp checks that you will receive when you're off from work, when a doctor has you off and says you can't go back yet. Medical benefits, of course, workers' compensation is required to pay for all reasonable and necessary medical treatment. And that's not just the medical treatment that you're receiving now, but any medical treatment in the future also.
Okay.
And then the last benefit is what we call permanent partial disability or permanent total disability. We also call that loss of wage earning capacity. And essentially that's a benefit that is calculated by how this injury has impacted your ability to earn a living permanently.
Okay. Just like when you have to handle car wreck claims and people aren't able to go to work.
That's right.
Okay. And how are those benefits calculated?
So your temporary total disability benefits, your workers' comp checks, that's what everybody knows in the bonds, workers' comp checks. Those are going to be 2/3 of what your average weekly wage is. Now that's capped at a statutory maximum of around $490 per week.
Okay.
So, you know, if you make a good living and you're injured, a lot of times I'll get the question, well, I'm supposed to be getting 2/3 of my pay and I'm not, and it's because of that cap.
Okay. So speaking of caps, how long does workers' comp pay the benefits?
Workers' comp will pay the temporary total disability benefits up until the point in time that the doctor has released you to return to work or put you at what we call maximum medical improvement, MMI, we call it. So they will pay up until that point, and when those are shut off and you're able to return to work or unable to return to work after the doctor has released you, then we get into a period of what we call permanent partial disability, and those benefits can last up to 450 weeks.
Okay. So this question sounds like somebody's already maybe been in the process. It says, what should I say to the claims administrator?
Typically I would advise somebody not to say anything to the claims administrator, you know, other than on the front end to let them know that you were injured. But a lot of claims administrators on workers' comp claims will ask for a recorded statement. They want to get you on the phone. They want to try and take down information regarding the claim. And I typically advise all of our clients not to do that. I will do it every once in a while if there's an insurance company that I maybe trust a little bit, but it's seldom, because those recorded statements, those statements that you make to a claims administrator, those aren't for the injured worker's benefit. I can promise you that. Right.
Okay. Just like when an insurance company is calling you for car accidents or other things.
Right. That's exactly right.
You want to talk to your attorney first.
Well, you're still dealing with an insurance company at the end of the day, and insurance companies, they're in the business to make and save money. You know, you can't really fault them for that, but you also want to protect yourself and your claim in your best interest.
Or they're representing the other party.
That's right.
Okay. So how long do workers' comp cases typically take to settle?
Well, that's a tough question because they're all individual.
Okay, right.
Over the course of my career in handling workers' compensation claims, they typically probably average out to about 8 to 12 months. But it's important to know that your claim cannot settle. By law, it cannot settle until you reach that point of maximum medical improvement.
Okay.
The Workers' Compensation Commission over on Lakeland Drive, they will review all settlements. They will take and review information concerning the injury and that sort of stuff. They'll look at the doctor's note, and they will have to see a final medical report in there before they will approve a settlement.
Gotcha. All right. So if I settle my claim, can I reopen it later?
Not typically.
Okay.
Not typically. There are 2 different types of settlements. You can settle a claim just on what we call the indemnity portion and leave your future medicals open. So the indemnity is like the monetary type portion of the workers' comp claim, and then you can maintain an open medical file. There are some particular circumstances on which you can reopen a claim after you've settled everything provided that there's been it's what we call a substantial change in circumstances.
Okay.
Those are very rare.
Right.
Typically, if you settle a claim, it is settled. It is final. So you want to make sure that you do the right thing on the front end.
So not typically, but possibly, it's rare.
It's possible. It's very rare.
Okay. How are settlements calculated?
So everything with workers' comp is done by numbers. I mentioned earlier 450 weeks. That's the maximum benefit that you can get on a workers' compensation claim. But every part of our body, our arms, our legs, they all have a certain number of weeks attached to them. Like your arm has 200 weeks attached to it. Your leg has 175 weeks. Your eyes, your ears, they all have a certain number of weeks that the Mississippi legislature has assigned to each individual's body.
That is interesting.
And what we do is we look at what the doctor says about whether you've suffered any sort of impairment to that part of your body, and then calculate that out according to the number of weeks, and then we try and maximize that number.
Okay.
It's a little bit, it takes a while to learn how to do it. No doubt that's another reason I tell people to get an attorney, because it can be very confusing. There are algorithms that you never see again.
Yeah, because you could hurt all of those things at one time.
Yeah,
really,
you can.
So.
That's right.
Wow. Okay. What does it cost to hire a workers' compensation attorney? Nothing.
There's no cost out of pocket. The law actually details what an attorney can charge on a workers' compensation claim, and that's going to be 25%, a 25% contingency. So, like my firm, we never receive any compensation for the representation of our clients up until the end of the claim, when it's either settled or we get an award from a judge, and then my fee is 25%.
Okay, so even with workers' comp cases, you have the no-fee guarantee of Maggio Thompson.
That's right, absolutely.
Okay, all right. Our next question submitted is, what should I look for when hiring a workman's comp attorney?
It's the same thing that you want to look for when you're hiring any kind of attorney. You want to hire an attorney who has experience. Just like workers' comp is foreign to individuals who are injured, it can also be foreign to attorneys. So in the same way that somebody wouldn't come to me for a bankruptcy issue or a real estate issue, you want to make sure that you're hiring an attorney who has workers' compensation experience, who knows the other attorneys, who knows the judges, who has just experience in handling the ongoings of a workers' compensation claim from the beginning to the end.
That's why you're a personal injury expert. We actually have, you mentioned real estate and bankruptcy, we have experts for those fields as well. Okay, next is, can filing for workers' comp affect my employment?
You know, not typically. The way that it works is that employers have insurance. They have workers' compensation insurance, just like you and I have insurance on our vehicles. And so when somebody gets hurt at work, that's why you have the insurance there, is to protect the injured worker. I never, hardly under any circumstances, will speak to an employer. Typically, I'm dealing directly with the insurance company.
Okay.
And so I guess it's not impossible for it to affect your employment. We don't see it very often.
Okay. The next question, looks like someone had laws change during a case. How often do workers' comp laws change in Mississippi?
Not very often. In 2012, there was an overhaul of some of our workers' compensation laws. There was one law that changed this past year during this legislative session, but it was basically a small law. It's very rare. Workers' compensation has existed in Mississippi for years and years and years. The laws have been substantially similar during the course of all of those years, and so we don't really see those laws get changed like we do with some other areas of the law.
Okay, good to know. How long do I have to file a claim?
So the statute of limitations on a workers' compensation claim is 2 years.
Okay.
There are some variances there. As long as you're receiving medical treatment, you have up until 1 year after the last date you sought medical treatment. You treated with a doctor, you have 1 year there.
Okay.
And then there's the filing of what we call a B31. It's just a form that gets filed by insurance companies. You have a year after the filing of that. But typically for the vast majority of cases, it's going to be 2 years.
2 years, okay. Am I suing my boss directly?
No, you're not. And I get that question a lot. You're not suing your boss directly. Now, There may be some very rare circumstances under which you can sue your boss directly. For instance, maybe if they didn't file your claim, or they tried to lie about you getting hurt, or they tried to lie about how much money you were making. At some point after your workers' compensation claim, you can sue your boss directly. But
if they did something wrong.
If they did something wrong. Otherwise, though, your boss is insulated. They're protected. They're immune from a lawsuit because of what we call the Exclusive Remedy Act. What that means is that as long as your boss carries workers' compensation coverage, they can't be sued for any type of negligence or any other type of wrongdoing.
So it's the company that you're suing,
That's
not
right.
your boss directly. What if the boss is the owner of the company, though?
Well, it's the same thing. So the company and your boss are both going to be insulated. They'll be protected or immune from a direct lawsuit because of that exclusive remedy portion of the law.
Okay. I'm sure when people go through things like this, they're worried about the relationships with their job and their boss.
Oh, sure.
That's probably very sensitive.
That's completely understandable.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Okay. How does pain and suffering work on a workers' comp claim?
It doesn't. Okay, so there is no pain and suffering on a workers' compensation claim. We talked about the 3 benefits you're entitled to under workers' compensation, the temporary total disability, the medical benefits, and the permanent disability. Those are it. The reason being, like in a car accident claim where you can make a claim for pain and suffering, you have to prove that someone was negligent. With workers' compensation, you don't have to prove that anyone was negligent. As long as you were injured on the job, you're entitled to those limited benefits. You're not entitled to pain and suffering, so you have kind of a trade-off there.
Okay. All right. It looks like we have time to answer some of the Facebook Live questions. So I'm going to look over at these.
Okay.
Let's see. Good bit here. Selena Marie, what happens if I am in a car wreck while on a job? That's a good question.
That is a good question, Selena. So if that happens, if you travel for work and you're injured in a car accident, and let's say it was the fault of someone else, at that point you're going to have 2 claims. You will have a workers' compensation claim, and you will have just a regular third-party car accident claim against the driver who hit you. And there's some interplay there between workers' comp and the car accident claim. For instance, workers' comp will pick up and pay for all of your medical treatment. They'll pay for you while you're off from work. But then they have what we call a subrogation right. They're entitled to get that money back that they paid you from the at-fault party. And so typically if someone is involved in an accident like that, we want to handle both claims because of the interplay.
Okay. And what if the accident's your fault?
Then you're still entitled to workers' comp benefits. And someone may make a claim against you, but you are still entitled to those workers' comp benefits.
Okay. All right. Let's see. John and Amanda, what if you have to stay on workman's comp?
What if you have to stay on workers' comp? Well, if you have to stay on workers' comp, if you're unable to return to work, the workers' comp insurance carrier will continue to pay for your benefits for 450 weeks. At that point, they cut you off. A lot of our clients have to go get on Social Security disability or look for some other type of aid. They may have to take a job that has lighter lifting restrictions or a job that can accommodate whatever their injuries were.
Right.
But that's typically at 450 weeks, and then you're done.
Yeah, so the cap is 450 weeks
That's
if
right.
you're severely injured.
That's right.
Okay, this is not work related, but I fell at a Family Dollar by slipping off the sidewalk. No major injuries, but I was hurt pretty bad. Do I have a case?
Well, maybe. What you have to do, that's a premises liability claim. That's a slip and fall case.
A little different.
It's a little bit different. That is a area of the law where you do have to show fault. So workers' comp, you don't show fault. On that type of a claim, what you would have to show is that the Family Dollar was in some way negligent, that they didn't secure the premises, that they had done something that they shouldn't have done, or vice versa. But you will have to show that. So you very well could have a claim. I would suggest talking to an attorney to find out.
Okay. And you already mentioned pain and suffering in one of the questions submitted to the Ask the Experts page, but we'll go ahead and answer Jillian. She said, can I sue my employer for pain and suffering?
No, and we answered that one earlier, but unfortunately, no.
All right, let's see. Okay, well, this one isn't workers' comp. Can I sue for getting an infection on the inside of my stomach from the hospital I had my daughter at?
Well, maybe that's probably going to fall under what we call medical malpractice, where either a doctor or a physician or his staff does something that they shouldn't have done. So potentially, it's just one of those things where you're going to have to speak with an attorney who handles medical malpractice claims and find out, see what the standard of care was, see if a physician deviated from that standard of care, and an attorney will probably be able to tell you if you have a claim.
All right. Can I sue work comp for mental injuries like PTSD?
Sure, and I've represented a lot of people who have suffered PTSD, a lot of police officers, a lot of firefighters. I've represented a lot of first responders who have suffered post-traumatic stress disorder, and those are what we call mental claims, and those are absolutely valid claims. Those are just because you don't have a cut on your arm or a bruise to your head doesn't mean that you aren't in some way injured.
So it's not considered an actual workers' comp claim?
It is.
It's called something? Okay.
No, it is. It is. It's a claim that would fall under workers' compensation.
Okay. Let's see. If an employee clicks out and is walking to a car and falls, injured ankle, I work parking lot due to shoes, is this workers' comp?
Probably, yeah. I mean, if it's that close in proximity to your employment and you are working while you're in the parking lot, then sure.
Okay.
That's probably going to be a compensable injury.
All right. What if I am a truck driver and injured on the job in another state, but my home base is here in Mississippi?
That's a really good question. So that's a jurisdictional issue. In order for a claim to exist in Mississippi, the injury has to occur here or your employer has to be here in Mississippi. And so if you are in that situation, a truck driver, and you're injured while out of state hauling a load, but your employer is based in Mississippi, Mississippi will still have jurisdiction, and that will be a Mississippi workers' compensation claim. It could also be a claim in the state where you were injured.
Okay. So the next question is from someone familiar to me. Hi, Richard. He says, and we actually answered this question from the Ask the Experts page. It says, does a business have to have a certain number of employees to have workers' comp?
They do. They have to have five or more employees. It's always a good idea, even if you only have just a couple of employees, go ahead and buy workers' compensation coverage. It's so cheap. It's the best deal out there, and just to make sure that your employees are protected. But the law requires that there be five or more.
And that can include the boss?
That would include the boss.
Okay.
So, for instance, if I have 4 people who work for me, one of those individuals is hurt, they are entitled to workers' compensation because I would count.
Okay. All right. Let's see. Someone answered that question. Let's see. Is there another money claim once you close out medical?
Typically, no. If you have not, in my experience, no. Typically, you're going to close out your monetary claim first and then your medical claim. Most of the time, they're done simultaneously. But, if you have not closed one without the other, maybe. I just haven't seen that in my career.
Okay.
But I guess it's possible.
Okay. Can your employer fire you if your doctor doesn't provide documentation?
In Mississippi is an at-will employment state. So in Mississippi, your employer can fire you for any reason at all. So if they don't like the way your hair looks one day, then they can fire you without any real repercussion. There are a few exceptions under what we call Title VII, so age, race, sex, things like that. Those are protected, but for the most part, your employer can terminate you.
Okay. If you have a previous injury that gets worse from your job, can that be used as a workers' comp case, or does it have to be a new injury only?
Sure. No, that's fine. We see that many times where you have an exacerbation of a pre-existing condition. Okay. So we handle those types of claims all of the time, and it makes sense, right? So if you hurt your knee a couple of years ago, your knee didn't get 100% better, and then you re-injure it while on the job, it would only make sense that that is a compensable work claim that you can receive benefits for.
Now, would that have to have been divulged to the employer when you started for there to be a claim? Or?
Not necessarily,
no. Okay.
No.
All right. Let's see. My son worked at a chemical distribution center, and he would have breathing issues and burns on his skin. He has left his job. What recourse would he have now? He keeps having rashes, etc.
So he could very well have a workers' compensation claim. What he would need to do is to get his doctor to causally relate the injuries that he has to his work condition. So if his treating physician indicates or renders an opinion that the condition he's suffering from is related to his exposure to those different elements at his place of work, then he could very well have a workers' compensation claim.
Okay, good to know. All right. Let's see. Can you receive a check from employer and workers' comp while off work due to injury?
Not typically. I mean, you can to some degree. A lot of times your employer will pay a small amount and workers' compensation will make up the difference. So there's nothing that really prohibits that, but you don't see it very often at all. Typically, if you're injured at work and the doctor has you off, then workers' compensation is going to pick up and provide 100% of those benefits.
Okay. And can you be fired while on medical leave?
Again, yes, you can. Here's the kicker with that, though. So yes, you can. You can be fired for any reason at all, but if your employer fires you while you're off under a doctor's care, then there can be a presumption that you are permanently and totally disabled, right? Or if your employer says we can't accommodate your restrictions, then the presumption there is that you've suffered either a 100% loss of industrial use or that you were permanently and totally disabled. Your employer and the insurance company will then at that point have to come in and try their best to prove that you can find work, even though they won't let you work for them.
Okay.
Yeah.
Now, Seth, I know you and your partner, Mike, personally return all phone calls. Yeah. Tell everyone that phone number.
Our number is 601-300-3333.
And your website is?
It's mtlawms.com.
Okay. Maggio Thompson will be back with us live from the Hub June 27th at 2 p.m. Go to our Ask the Experts page on WLBT.com to view the upcoming schedule and submit your questions for all our experts. Seth, thank you for being here with us today.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you. I'm Kelly Boyd. Thank you for watching WLBT's Ask the Experts.